Hey everyone. So, useless is kind of a strange word, because generally you'd think of it as sort of being a derogatory thing. And yeah, I guess that's kind of true, because for something to be totally useless, it means that it's not meeting any sort of purpose. Or it's just so totally impractical that you'd never ever see it being used in a real world situation. I mean, any machine that requires you to rename thousands of individual minecarts is certainly not practical in any sense of the word. But in reality, it's not so harsh of a term, because if you design something with the initial intent of it being useless, then technically it's useful, it's satisfied its purpose of not doing anything. And I quite like the idea of fulfilling arbitrary, pointless goals, and given the fact that a ton of the stuff on my channel is essentially dedicated to doing exactly that, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the art of designing useless nonsense and why I kind of prefer it to designing stuff that actually does something. Well, where to begin? To start off, I guess generally, designing useless stuff is kind of both easier and more difficult than designing something that actually fulfills a purpose. The main reason is because building stuff requires doing a little bit of figuring stuff out, and generally if you're not optimizing something that already exists, but designing something that fulfills a completely new purpose that nobody's touched before, you're generally going to have a hard time finding useful information. This generally explains why it might have been a little bit difficult figuring out the exact teleportation patterns of wolves, because quite frankly, teleporting wolves is not a redstone component that people are touching fairly frequently. But designing useless stuff is also a little bit easier because you're not really competing with people, you're just trying to make the thing work and complete the arbitrary and stupid objective that you've set out for yourself. And if everybody else is spending so much time trying to make that record-breaking machine, chances are nobody's contesting you for the category that doesn't exist yet. Yet, even though there's not really a whole lot that you're competing for, you definitely should strive for some semblance of optimization. See, if I'm going to head and build the worst tree farm in existence, being this end crystal power tree farm, it should still be the fastest end crystal tree farm. Even if it's only going to end up making 3 logs per minute anyways, it should do it efficiently. Making your machine do that incredibly dumb dead-end idea of a thing incredibly fast is a lot of the fun, and optimization is just a really big part of what makes these really stupid ideas actually interesting. A lot of the problem solving actually comes from you trying to do a good job, even if the idea is stupid in principle. But where do you start? Well, first you have to kind of decide the idea, and one of the best ways to do it is take a problem that already has a ton of really great solutions and design a really backwards one. A good example of this is kind of my entire flying machine series, because the reality is that this entire series exists to provide an alternative to the age-old solution of just sitting in a flying machine and setting a timer on your phone or something. But I guess the point wasn't necessarily coming up with a perfect solution, but more so just even leading to the creation of all of this garbage anyways. I didn't want to make something that worked, I wanted to make something that fulfilled the completely arbitrary constraint of that you can't use anything outside of the game of Minecraft. And I'm going to be honest, all of these various flying machines, compared to the age-old solution of setting the timer and just going, they definitely suck. But the thing is that they do the one thing that I made them to do really well, and that's what's important. Another really great example is this thing, because redstone lamps have existed for just about a decade, but that doesn't necessarily stop me from making new and innovative ways to display numbers. This little project is my 7-segment LCD display panel, and the mechanics that it uses are actually really cool. The main principle we're using is the fact that walls aligned straight forward allows us to look through them and see the sea lantern backlight behind them, whereas if we realign the walls such that they face parallel to the backlight surface, then we can barely see the light shine through it all. The way that we're actually able to modify the alignment is by shifting every other column in a checkerboard pattern of walls and fence posts, and what essentially happens here is since the fence posts won't touch the walls and the walls won't touch the fence posts, depending on which position they're in, they will change their direction to match what we want. What you eventually end up with is something that's not too spectacular up close, but if you take the time to step back, you actually end up with a really pretty way of displaying numbers. The only unfortunate drawback with this design though is it kind of loses all of its visual integrity the moment you step out of essentially a 45-degree angle of the thing, But I suppose you could possibly stack very large digits vertically, as this effect is not seen when you travel up or down. Or if we go back even further, we can talk about this absolute contrivance of an arrow-powered mob farm, essentially a creeper farm that operates solely on skeletons firing arrows onto slime blocks. This thing is absolutely fantastic, so I highly recommend you go check out the video, info card, where I talk about exactly just how it works. Another possible route you could go to figuring out a good idea for something totally useless is to flip an idea on its head. A bunch of people spend so much time trying to design iron farms, trying to figure out the fastest way to produce iron, and nobody spends enough time trying to figure out how to destroy it as quickly as possible. This machine was essentially designed to do just that. Using very clever principles and a lot of really incredible timings, we're able to burn through 20 anvils per second in just about the most fashionable way possible. You can also just go to the strategy of just making up problems in their entirety. One of the very first videos that I ever made posed the absolutely brilliantly stupid problem of sorting colored sheep. Considering that this is a situation that you pretty much exclusively never end up with in any given situation, and the idea of sorting sheep can be trivialized if you just have enough dye, you can just change the dye of any given sheep at any time, this problem just outright doesn't exist. Yet, even so, I still went through the hell of an optimization process that was complying with the incredibly stupid standards that I had set for myself, which is essentially why this thing ended up with 2 giant piston bolts and way more tech than it needs to commit to the act of just sorting sheep by color. But at the end of it all, if you're going to design something, make sure that it looks cool, because one of the most important things that I always consider when I design something is the end product going to actually look like something interesting? And that's because if you're making something useful, you've already made something worth keeping. But if you hit the worth keeping box without actually making it useful, then you've gone ahead and created art. But even if it's not interesting in the slightest, or maybe it just needs to be revised, as all projects do in the beginning, or you can just leave it like that, it doesn't really matter in the end, because the most important thing is that you learn something new while making it, or you had a whole lot of fun. At least most of the time. The debugging process usually isn't very fun. Anyways, you may have noticed that today's video had a little bit of a different kind of theme to it, a little bit different structure. That's because I didn't necessarily focus on a specific project, but more so against a range of ideas. If you'd want me to cover some more abstract topics or general ideas like in this video, make sure to let me know, or if there's just any other stuff that you might want to see me do, then make sure to let me know in the comment section as well. Anyways, if you want to know how any of the things that I designed on this channel actually work, make sure to go check out the videos on my channel, as well as make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll see you next time.